Candice, are we ready?
Yes, you can go ahead.
Thank you very much. Well, good day, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies, gentlemen, colleagues, and friends. My name is Michela Daraso. I am the chair holder of the UNESCO Chair on Sustainable Water Security at Florida International University, and also Director of International Programs at the Institute of the Environment. Allow me to welcome all of you to the Global Water for Security Forum, which is a joint venture between the School of International, we have International Public Affairs and also the Institute of Environment. And this is the second joint venture between SIPA and IOE in terms of the Global Security Forum. So SIPA, it's really one of our school at FIU, and it has been in 2018 designated as the #1 model for UN Best delegation. Also, it has 2 master's degrees related to foreign policy and international relations that has been also recognized by the Times Higher Education panel. In addition, for its research on poverty and support of poor students and citizens in local communities, Times Higher Education has also designated FIU as #15 worldwide. In addition, the SIPA has a bachelor's degree and also a master's degree on criminal justice and political science. And both of these bachelor's degrees are #2 within the US. In relation to the Institute of Environment, it is a permanent program here at FIU. It involves, in terms of its research agenda, over 60 countries worldwide. It handles a portfolio in research of over $40 million and has over 1,200 peer-reviewed publications from its participants. The main topics of research of the institutes are freshwater resources, coastlines and ocean, and biodiversity and conservation. In terms of the UNESCO Water Share, we are the first and only UNESCO Chair on Sustainable Water Security among the 300 chairs in the Natural Science Division. And we host 3 discussion forums, of which this one that we are here today, the Global Water Security Forum, as I said initially, is a joint venture with the School of International and Public Affairs here at FIU. So thank you very much for being here today. We have a very interesting group of panelists and an outstanding keynote speaker in the person of Dr. Michela Miletto. So without any more introductions, I would like to pass the microphone to my friend and colleague, Dr. Giulia Daraso, who is the Associate Dean for Graduate Studies and Innovation at SIPA, and is also the person that is in charge of policy within the UNESCO Water Share. So Dr. Shamar, you have the floor.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Maria. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are around the world. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to thank certainly the Institute of the Environment, the UNESCO Chair, Michela Daraso, Candice Alouche, for their partnership and collaboration. This is truly a wonderful partnership as we bring these wonderful speakers to all of you. Really, I want to get into our, as Dr. Daraso mentioned, I want to get into our main event, which certainly is our keynote speaker. We will then have a panel of experts who will speak about, who will not only reflect on Dr. Miletto's presentation, but also talk about their own work as well, which is absolutely fascinating in the scope of the theme of this particular lecture. But without further ado, let me introduce Dr. Michela Miletto, excuse me, before she begins her remarks. So Michela Miletto joined UNESCO in 2008 as Deputy Coordinator of the World Water Assessment Program. But since January of 2021, she is the new coordinator and director of this UNESCO program. Michela has been involved for over 20 years in the assessment, development, and management of water resources, and also worked in geothermal energy and environment. Her working experience in technical assistance includes projects, implementation in various regions as the Mediterranean, the United States, Europe, Central and South America, and the Caribbean, Eastern Africa, and China. Dr. Miletto, a native of Italy, joined WWAP from the Organization of American States, General Secretariat in Washington, D.C., where she served as a water resources senior specialist since 2002. During her tenure at the OAS, her activities concentrated on groundwater management, water pollution, and exploration and development of geothermal renewable energy resources. And previously, she also served as associate professor for 8 years at the Department of Earth Sciences at the University of Turin in Italy. Dr. Miletto, it's really an honor and pleasure to have you with us. The floor is yours, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Shlomo, and thank you very much for this fantastic invitation. And good morning, and good afternoon, and good evening, and happy Women's Day to all of you. This is very important for the day. Before starting my presentation, I would like to thank the organizers and the staff of the Florida International University and the UNESCO Chair on Sustainable Water Security for this invitation, which actually it is quite timely, because I would like to share with you some news that we have in our program, the World Water Assessment Program of UNESCO. So let's start with my presentation then on water governance and gender perspective. Okay, let's move to the next. Yes, please. Thank you. Okay, everybody is aware that water is a prerequisite to life, and it's a fundamental human right recognized by the UN resolution in 2010. Nonetheless, we know that 2.2 billion people have no access to the safe drinking water. And when I say 2.2 billion, I mean a very big dimension. To give you an idea, it is like saying 3 persons out of 10, and 4.2 billion people, which means six persons out of 10, do not have access to safely managed sanitation services. So the agenda, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, addressed directly this problem and called for investment for sustainable infrastructures and services for this amount of people that lack these resources. Recently, the UN have established a new framework. The name is Global Acceleration Framework for the SDG 6 for water and sanitation, that identifies 5 accelerators that we need to use to reach the achievements for 2030. One of these accelerators is financing, and the other is governance. Indeed, how water is distributed, who has access to it, who control it, who maintain the system, who makes decisions regarding the different uses, and who benefits of these uses are quite a complex management and governance matter that is shaped with other complex factors. So currently, roles and responsibility are not really very well determined. More often, they are fragmented, unclear, and there are overlaps in mandates at all levels of governance. Water governance, in fact, includes or should include these elements. One is the political environment and system that guide the decisions related to the use and allocation of water resources. Another element is the economic and financial situation that determines how water resources are managed. So if you have money or not. Administrative systems that are involved in planning, management, and delivery of water system and water supplies for different uses, and also for different users. And finally, social systems to manage water resources for the at different levels, and in particular in this case for community level, which is a very important level to start with, in particular for women. So governance lays at the very base of water access, and so it determines water security. And for this reason, it's very important that governance be inclusive and can represent all the different perspectives of different groups that might have disparate needs or challenges with respect to water. And of course, in this scenario, gender is a critical factor. Gender responsive water governance ensures that the needs and perspective of both women and men are taken into consideration in all aspects of water planning, management, and delivery. Can I have the next, please? Okay. Why it is so crucial that water governance is gender responsive? Several factors such as ethnicity, gender, type of water access have been shown to determine one's water security level. And also several studies demonstrate that females have a lower water security level with respect to men, directly related to the fact that there are those that fulfill the role of collecting and carrying water in the global development regions. And this has, of course, some negative consequences. For example, one is related with health. So there is a lower physical and also psychological health due to injuries, to stress, to mental fatigue. Another important element is the less time being left for income generating activities, a phenomenon that we name as time poverty, and also it is also related to less time for education. And eventually, there are, of course, weaker social relationships because they don't have time to engage relationship into the community groups. Based on that, we can argue that water insecurity is directly linked to shortcomings in water governance. If we want to achieve a water security for all, we need to recognize the differential needs of all different groups and account them for in the water governance exercise. Next, please. Thank you. One key contributor to the persistence of gender inequalities and the underrepresentation of women is the lack of adequate national framework that ensure gender responsiveness in water governance. Despite the fact that indeed there are many international frameworks that have clear gender references and specifically reference to women. And here is the table with a list of most of them, like Dublin Principles on the IWRM, with principle number 3, Agenda 2030, etc. Nonetheless, we don't have this reflected in the national frameworks, or if we have indeed gender responsive policies that do exist in many countries, but the difficulty is to implement them on the ground at the different level of governance. And we will see a few examples later on. A policy survey conducted in 2013 by the IUCN and Women for Water Partnership in almost 900 environment ministry in 193 member states found that only 12% of this ministry were led by women. Next, please. In fact, more recently in 2016, we had very similar results compared with this survey, thanks to a water and gender analysis that WAP carried out in a global project in transboundary aquifers, finding that women are generally underrepresented in the institutional body that manage transboundary aquifers in that case. For instance, in Central Asia, Kazakhstan only shows that 20% of the paid positions in local water governance institutions, like Water User Association, for instance, are held by women. The other region in which we work, in Southern Africa, the study shows that women form only 27% of the local water governance members in user associations, water boards, and water committee in the region's municipalities. So that is very low number, but there is an encouraging data because it is also shown that women make up 59% of the elected local councillor for water, sanitation and hygiene, of course, WASH, meaning that there is at least a strong presence at the local level, at the grassroots community level. Can I have the other one, please? So while the reasons for these deep inequalities in the water sectors are many and complex, it is clear that in order to turn the tide, we need to make effective improvement in water governance, which means that gender-responsive water policies approach shall be incorporated to ensure women and girls, but also all disadvantaged groups in general to equally benefit. Another point is the continuous discrepancy between water and policy, and its implementation needs to be reduced. This is a very important point. And eventually, last but not least, the in-depth understanding and identification of the vulnerabilities and needs of different groups. And this can be done through the collection of data. The fact is that, unfortunately, sex disaggregated data are very few, and we still have a huge lack of reliable data. Only 37% of the countries in the world regularly produce sex disaggregated water data related to water, like, for instance, for water access and sanitation and hygiene. Next, please. For this reason, UNESCO WAP has engaged itself since 2014 to help close the existing data gap and develop a set of tools on the collection of sex disaggregated water data. These tools are complemented by a comprehensive capacity program on how to use this data to inform decision-making and create gender-responsive policies. Next, please. And here you can see the covers of the 4 tools consist in the 2019 edition of the toolkit: methodology, indicators, guidelines, and questionnaires. And in the tool indicators, we have identified more than 100 gender transformative indicators divided in 10 thematic categories, which address the interconnections with the goals of the 2030 agenda, as you can see. One of these indicator is on water governance. Can I have the next, please? And this indicator or group of indicators include 4 subtopics, each one referring to different stages or level of water governance. So you have the policy framework, and then you have the institutions, the programs and the projects, and eventually the local institutions and communities and administrations. Next, please. Oh yes, these are some data, some data from the field, and this we did this exercise actually to during a project that we developed in 2015-2016 on transboundary aquifer areas in different regions of the world. One was Southern Africa, the other was in Central America and Central Asia. One of the goals of the surveys was to test whether the analysis of sex disaggregated water data collected in the field with the gender responsive indicators could reflect the implementation of the national water policies on the ground. We used the indicators specifically on water decision-making within the household. And the household, intra-household surveys were carried out in villages in 2 countries of Southern Africa that I want to show you. This is an example from Botswana, from sampled villages in Botswana, where we see that the majority of females, 48%, and males, 88%, indicates that the role of making decisions on water matters is fulfilled by males, while females have been indicated as the primarily responsible for the care of water quality and quantity into the household. So for the domestic use of water, the unproductive use of water, of course. In this aspect, the field results do not match to the Botswana water efficiency plan and to the national water policies, which emphasize the need for participatory governance of water resources to ensure gender and social equity. Next, please. And this one is, yes, this one is on Namibia. This is the same survey that we have done in Namibia, in an area of large, extensive farms. And regarding the productive use of water, And in this case, the data suggests that decision-making and implementation related to farm irrigation is largely a male responsibility, as you can see from the diagrams. Based on the survey, women in that area do not have a full or equal role in the management of commercial farms. This is the reality on the ground, but the Namibian constitutions requires equitable gender roles in local level water management. Next, please, thank you. Starting in 2020, in line with the celebration of the 25 years of the Beijing Declaration, WAP and its Water and Gender Working Group, an international multi-stakeholder platform, have developed an in-depth analysis on the progress of gender equality in the water sector in the last 25 years. The work was quite articulated, touched different topics, different sectors and elements, and shown that the progress towards the realization of the 2030 agenda is still not on track. In line with these findings, WAP believes that bold action is urgently needed, and together with the core working group and an extended multi-stakeholder coalition are working for the launch of a call for action, accelerating gender equality in the water domain, bridging the data gap, and developing concrete action. So this is a very exciting moment, because of course this is the first time that we are talking in public, and we are sharing with participants the call for action that has been widely disseminated through social media and within the working group. The scope of the call is raising the attention of decision makers, of political leaders, of the private sectors of our member states, and urge them to take concrete actions for accelerating progress towards gender equality within the water sector and within 2030, the time requested for the agenda. The working group and WAP are preparing a set of recommendations on very concrete actions that will be collected and contained in a position paper and then included into the call. Next, please. To conclude, we have seen that in order to achieve water security for all, the differential needs of all groups must be recognized and accounted for in water governance through gender responsive approaches. From the field, we have seen from the pilot, we have seen that still we have discrepancies existing between policies and implementation. And there is quite a difference between what the national policy states and the reality measured on the ground. This discrepancy must be reduced, of course, and data collection is essential to provide clear and uncontrovertible evidence. The results of the analysis on gender achievement in water sector is in the last 25 years, done by the work, the WAP Gender Working Group, show that progress towards the realization of the 2030 agenda is clearly not in track. And for in line with this finding, WAP is promoting a multi-stakeholder call for action to catalyze attention and trigger concrete actions. And with this, next please. And with this, I conclude my presentation and I thank you for your attention. And please follow the Twitter and visit our website. Thank you very much. Over to you, Shlomi.
Thank you so much, Michela. Great presentation, very informative. What we'd like to do now is we'd like to host our panel discussion. I'd like to introduce the panelists and would like to tell those of you who are listening in the audience, if you've got questions that you want to ask any of the panelists, please feel free to insert them in the chat, or if you'd like to vocally ask your question, raise your hand and we will call on you. We'll kind of alternate between chat and the raised hand function, and we'll do it that way. So please feel free to do so throughout the panel discussion. So let me in fact introduce our panelists. We have with us today Dr. Susanna Rose, who is Associate Provost for the Office to Advance Women, Equity, and Diversity here at FIU. AWED, as it's also called, this particular office is also a co-sponsor of this particular event, a partner in this event. So we're very grateful to Susanna and her office for her co-sponsorship or partnership in this particular event. I also want to introduce Lena Salame, who is a lawyer and conflict mitigation specialist in the Water Ethics Network, a trustee in the Water Witness International, a member in the Secretariat of the Geneva Water Hub, as well as a member of POINT, which stands for Program on International Negotiation Training. And Lena is also a part of the university's Partnership for Water Cooperation and Diplomacy. Our next panelist is Dr. Giulia Daraso, who is Associate Professor in the Department of Global and Sociocultural Studies here in the Stephen J. Green School of International Public Affairs at FIU. So it's a pleasure to have you all. Thank you for being with us. So really, I'd like to kind of kick it off with a question. And since we have two panelists who represent two units or two organizations, I'd like to start with Susanna Rose, if I can, as it relates to really the role of your office in this particular mission, and specifically, my question to you is reflecting on Michela's presentation, as well as important concepts that were mentioned: governance, inclusivity, equal representation, and of course, the importance of different perspectives. Can you just say a few things about what FIU is doing, what your office is doing along those lines?
So let me first ask if Candace was going to tell me if my photo is right on the screen. Am I showing?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, thank you. So thank you so much for this opportunity to speak to you all. I'm very excited about this project. I'm a psychologist by training, so this is all very interesting to me to learn about the international scene and women in water. I'd like to start some remarks by using a quote. This is a quote that's been attributed to Albert Einstein. "It is easier to smash an atom than a prejudice." I think this reflects the kind of work we're doing to try to bring women into water governance, to try to bring women faculty into governance of the university, to have more of a voice. We really have a very high difficulty level trying to change attitudes about gender, about race, about indigenous groups, whatever the stereotypes have been, and whatever the dominant group has defined the other to be, that has made it very problematic for them to, gain footing in the university. And we're doing, excuse me, my voice is really bad today. We're fortunate at FIU that the National Science Foundation took an interest in this and has given us funding to try to bring more women into the STEM fields, for instance. So what I would just like to say is we're operating at 3 different levels here, and we have to change attitudes. We have to get people to change their behaviors, and then we also have to have institutional support for these changes. So I don't know if the format, Shlomi, is if I should speak at a greater length about this, or we should, move to other people. I wasn't quite clear what.
Yeah, I mean, if you'd like to say anything else about kind of what you're doing in this regard, I just thought it was not since we have several representatives of several units and institutions, you're kind of what you all are doing in that regard. But if you want to add anything else, please feel free to do so.
Okay, so let me say what we started about 10 years ago working on educating people about unconscious bias and how it affects evaluation of people, how you treat people when they're in a meeting, whether you promote them or not. And I think the reason we started this is because for years, there's been an interest in getting more women to have more influence, but it's sort of been a fix the woman type of issue. We have to teach women how to fit in better. We have to teach them how to be more assertive. We have to get them to change to fit into a structure that really wasn't built to reflect them. And now there's been more interest in institutional change to focus on how we have to work with the dominant groups to educate them about their own unconscious thoughts and behaviors and make them more aware of what they're doing. So let's just say this is a long process. We did for 10 years. We've done hiring workshops and brought people in to get faculty entirely to be more intentional about what they're doing, and also to talk to them about best practices to use to make sure you don't let these biases come in. But we also moved recently into talking about behavior change because people would come back and say, I'm very interested in this and I want to do something, but I don't know what to do. And so instead of focusing on why we should be aware of this, we moved to talking about how to make the change. And so that led us to develop a bystander leadership workshop where we do get people to notice what's happening. We took case studies from here at FIU, and that was very helpful because people said, oh, this certainly can't happen here. And we could say, yes, it did happen here. And here are some tools to respond to that kind of situation. And we get people practice in doing it. And an interesting aspect of this is that we have quite a lot of international faculty at FIU. And that brings in, a host of different cultural values about gender and race. And it is very much building a community to have people across departments and across nationalities working together to really address these issues in a straightforward fashion. So I'm a big proponent of sometimes you can't change people's attitudes. Let's see if you can get them to change their behavior. And then their attitudes change because they have more options and tools and they feel empowered to do things. And the third level is the institutional change. And you have to have an institutional plan. A lot of what we've done has been very grassroots focused. I mean, working with the faculty, to faculty, and having the respect of the faculty facilitators, respect the participants. So that's very important. But we also, to firm this up, we have every department at FIU, and there's 60 or some departments or more, have to have a diversity, equity, and inclusion plan. And this is a plan that has, we came up with 60 metrics of covering 10 areas. And every year chairs report on their progress toward that. And it's something the faculty are supposed to decide in the fall what their goals are going to be and then track those goals. And a lot of change is just getting people to pay attention to things. An easy example is to say, how many women speakers have you had in your seminar series? So there's a lot of simple measures that people will just say, oh, I didn't notice there weren't any. So then they'll do something about it. You don't have to always be heavy-handed in these kind of things. So it took us about 6 to 10 years to see results. And currently, what's happened though, there's so many faculty that have gone through the programs that they now endorse the programs. And we have increased the number of women in STEM from 11% to 20%. We have increased the number of Hispanic faculty from 15 to 21%. And the Black faculty remain at about 8%, but we've done really well. We've only been really focusing on that for 2 years, and we're doing very well with our recruitment this year. So some of the things we've done along the way have been to get women to know each other and network and support each other. And I noticed in some of the slides that were shown, there's one or two women at a table, and there are even things that women can think of to do to interrupt the dominance that's usually there. For instance, sometimes if there's two women in a group, they'll sit together. Well, maybe it's better to not sit together and support each other across the table. Take a seat at the head of the table. Just some things that it means that women have to coordinate and be in touch with each other and know they need to do these interventions. So again, I'm back to the behavior change. I'm really a big proponent of thinking about how to change your own behavior in order to get other people's behavior to change. So just to conclude these brief remarks, I would like to say, it's taken 10 years to get to where we are. We still have a really, really long way to go, but it works to try to change the conversation. And I think even with the multiplicity of things you have to deal with women in governance, there are allies to look for. You don't have to convert everybody to be right thinking on this. You just need enough goodwill to get the movement going. And, this is a lifetime work. My motto is never give up. So I hope I can help with any of our ideas. I'd be glad to share more of what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think it's very refreshing to hear this, because even though what you are specifically doing is related to FIU and our various departments, schools, colleges, these lessons are certainly transferable to other organizations, whether it be in terms of water or any other issue. So thank you for that. I wanted to, along those same lines of kind of what is your organization doing type of a question, because we heard about UNESCO, we heard about WAP. I want to turn to Lena Salome, and Lena, you're obviously very active in a variety of organizations, but one of them that you're quite active in as well is the university's partnership for water cooperation and diplomacy, which brings together several universities, including FIU, where Maria and I and FIU is very excited to be part of that. What are you all doing in this regard? Again, kind of reflecting on Michela's comments, and what is the organization doing in this regard?
Thank you, Shlomi. Can you see me and hear me? Yeah.
Yes,
yeah. First, I would like to say hi to Michela, whom I haven't seen for a long time now, and then also say hello to my fellow panelists, whom I'm glad to meet. So as you mentioned, at the UPWCD, the university's partnership for water cooperation and diplomacy, I actually noticed by surprise that more than half of the active participants, for example, to our meeting last week were women. And that was I have to admit that we didn't do it on purpose. It just happened to be. We had about 30 institutions represented by around 40 people, and more than half were women. And that was a very rewarding and very nice surprise. And actually, it shows that more and more women are active and influential and engaged and committed in the academic arena. Because I will open a parenthesis for those who don't really know what UPWCD is. It's a network of institutions that are working towards the development of knowledge and capacity related to water cooperation and diplomacy. So it's a network of mostly universities, but we also have other institutions like professional institutions and NGOs who are working towards the same objective and who want to make a difference, who want to really actually feed policy making with science, who want to make an impact on the global discourse related to water cooperation and diplomacy, and who want to enhance capacity deficiencies and development. And this brings me to well, in addition to the fact that we are women, that there are a lot of women in that network, what each institution is doing is an added value to the network. Because, for example, I give you one of the institutions that is part of the network is the University of Geneva, who is working on assessing the number of women working in water diplomacy in the Middle East. They had a study that went through several countries in the Middle East and assessed the number of are doing and how they are doing it. And the objective is to try and push them and move them forward and enhance their capacity into sitting next to their fellow or to their men colleagues at the negotiating table in terms of when it comes to water issues. So you just stop me when I have to stop, okay? Because I can go on for a while. So I tend to agree with the former speaker. We have to change the behavior. We have to change the attitude, because the actual problem is in the mind of people. It's not really in my view, it's not in the norms. It's not really in the institutions, because they are relatively gender neutral. The laws are not written because they are done for men. It doesn't say the 1997 Convention on Transboundary Water Cooperation doesn't say that it's a man who has to sit on this table to prevent a water conflict or to negotiate or to participate in a mediating or in an arbitration panel. So in principle, the how do we say, the institutions and the norms are supposed to be gender neutral, but it seems to me like our fundamental principles are in crisis today, and we don't really recognize that something that is supposed to be so obvious is actually becoming a problem now, and we are trying to fight and invest time and energy to make something that is supposed to be normal happen. So we have like a crisis in our fundamental principles. That's why we have to, the education, and this is where the role of the UPWCD comes. This is where education and investment in education is actually the real investment. When you manage to educate people towards the right type of thinking, towards the right direction, then you have moved, then you really made a good investment on the long term. We all know that. I mean, and we all know that perceptions play a big role in this problematic, and maybe we'll come back to it later during the panel discussion. But sometimes perceptions are wrong as well. So I am a living example of a wrong perception. For example, just a joke and I will stop, okay? I grew up in the Middle East, and then probably people will say, okay, in the Middle East, women's role is very minimal. Women are not assertive. They are don't get access to education. They do not have access to a good position, professional position, and so on. But I grew up in such a different bubble that I was hit, and I tell you, I was hit very hard when I was working for UNESCO, trying to coordinate a meeting on education, on like developing a training manual for water cooperation and diplomacy among trainers coming from all countries of the Middle East. And the way I grew up, I behaved normally, as if maybe you would have behaved, or maybe as if, I don't know, anyone else would have behaved, as if I was equal to all these men, because this is how I grew up and how I was educated. But then my assertiveness was seen by the others as aggressiveness. So and this example is a mixture of how perceptions can be wrong on one side of the spectrum and on the other side of the spectrum. So while I should have been weak and feeble, I was strong and assertive. And while the others should not have seen me as weak and assertive, as weak and feeble, they did see me like this, and they rejected my role as a moderator of the meeting. So this is a fundamental, this is a fundamental problem that really is, it's a problem of perception and a problem of education, I think, and a problem of cultures. And this is where we have to invest. And this is why the UPWCD is a good place to start. Okay, I'll shut up because I see you nodding.
No, nodding means I'm listening. No, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Elena. And we'll definitely have time to go into this in greater detail. And of course, if I know that there's a question in the chat, which I'll get to in a second. But of course, if there's any reaction from the panelists, wonderful. But before we do that, I wanted to also bring in Giulia Daraso, because I think there is one group we haven't spoken about as well, and this is a group that Dr. Daraso does a lot of work on. So Juliet, your research is with indigenous people living in the Amazon. This is what you work on quite a bit, and it's a place defined by the abundance of water and rain. So the question to you is, in what ways do the governance issues faced by them intersect with what Michela spoke about? And you can also bring in the aspect of gender, of course, and women. I think that would be really informative to everyone.
Thank you, and it's wonderful listening to all of you and getting different perspectives on these issues. So thank you for letting me participate. I guess so. I'm a cultural anthropologist. I look at different cultures and how they, and part of that is how their lives are shaped by water and how they think about water. And in looking at the presentation today, I saw that one of the I don't know what they were called, but key indicators that they were incorporating into their guidelines was this indigenous knowledge. And I guess what my students and I have noticed is often that the development organizations use generalizations that are broad and that give us kind of a narrow understanding of some of the issues that indigenous people face. So the classic image of women with water is the woman carrying heavy water hours from the water source to her home. And then, as Michela mentioned, having to then miss out on school, miss out on other income earning opportunities, and even miss out on forming strong social relationships. And this can, it's so different from place to place. So one of my students works in the Colombian desert, the Guajira Peninsula, for example. And this is a classic image that is used to kind of understand how difficult it is for them to gain access to water. And so some major projects have been built to kind of improve access to water. And these projects tend to work for a few years, and local governance practices break down. And so then, so previously there would be somebody who was in charge of kind of keeping an eye on the pond where people were getting their water, making sure the fence around the pond was intact so that animals couldn't get into the water and dirty it, making sure people were removing the water in an appropriate way. And then once the new dam was built to increase access to water, no longer was there a system for watching these ponds. The fences broke down, the kind of norms around how to use that water broke down. But then the dam broke and people couldn't access water there anymore. And it was much harder to rebuild those local governance structures because they had broken down for a few years. So where I work, the issue is much more contamination by petroleum spills. So there's plenty of water, there's plenty of rain. People collect the rain, but the barrels they use for collecting the rain often get filled with soot from the fires that are used to burn off natural gas. in the petroleum extraction process. And so even that water has toxins in it, unfortunately. So I guess while I believe it's extremely important to involve women, I think it's also important to involve rural people, the people who face this huge array of different issues depending where they are. And I work in Ecuador, so it's right across the border from Colombia, but the people are experiencing such different issues, and you only get that by speaking to local people to find out what their major issues are.
Thank you so much. Let me, I'd like to involve we have certainly other questions we can ask the panelists. Before I actually get to the question in the chat, our first question from the audience, do any of the panel members want to react to anything that has been said by any of the panelists as well as Michela? I just wanted to give you that opportunity before we get into the question in the chat. Okay, so, please, Susanna, go ahead. I think you wanted to say something. You're on mute. I don't know if you wanted to say something.
No, I was just getting ready to participate.
Okay, with in regards to this question, I assume in the chat. But so let me go to the question that has been.
Can I say something?
Please, Michela, please.
Yes, I was. I was very. I liked what Elena was saying about, and Susanna were saying about perceptions. I really believe that there is a point there. So it is. We live in under social norms and cultural and cultural constraints or habits that we live along with them. But on the other hand, we need to look at this these specific aspects and see how we can open up this to and formulate some gender-related elements that are more linked to equality and equity in the relationships between women and men and between gender in general, but also considering that are rules that we need to have and to organize our societies, and these rules and which are also the policies that we have, the laws that we have, needs to be not gender neutral, but gender sensitive or gender responsive. We can live in communities where there is an understanding of each other, but also we need to have this kind of frameworks that that guarantee that gender equalities and these aspects are considered always.
Thank you. Susanna, did you want to add to that? I see that you're unmuted, so I'm not sure if you wanted to say something.
So, well, I was just looking at one of the questions in the chat. So the question, do you want to?
Sure, yes, I see we have two questions here in the chat. Let me perhaps start with the first, if we can, just to go in that order. So the question is, will the lack of women representation in local water government create a disproportionate gendered impact in the current fight against the COVID-19 pandemic? So obviously, I think a great question that for all the panelists here. Does anyone want to take that first? And let me ask, perhaps, again, I don't know, Juliet, if you've had to kind of think about this in the context of the groups you work with, Michela, if you had to think about this in the context of obviously what WAP and UNESCO is doing with COVID. So perhaps if you have any feedback on that.
Well, I would just say generally, we just did a webinar on COVID and women in academia. It's having such a devastating effect on women dropping out of the workforce. I really think it might lead to less representation. There's already a lack of women representation in local boards. There's likely to be even less with COVID because they are mostly the caregivers of the elder care, their own families and their children. And especially if schools are closed, it's an incredible responsibility on the women. So I don't know enough about the relationship between water and COVID specifically, but COVID is definitely having a detrimental effect on women's participation.
I mean, the way I could see it playing a role, you know, where I work, COVID went through like wildfire. And when I speak to people, they say most people have had it already. So, and unfortunately now there's a lot of misinformation about the vaccine. But what I could see happening is pulling girls out of school earlier if they're caring for sick elder people in their family. So it's kind of a continuation, you know, Michela talked about how sometimes the need to spend several hours a day getting water pulls girls out of formal. Sometimes, you know, they get a different sort of education. Their grandmothers go with them. They learn a lot from their grandmothers. They share traditions and history that are important to their culture, but it still reduces the types of opportunities that they might have to get salaried employment later in life.
Yeah, just to add on what Juliet was saying, yeah, I think that COVID-19, these pandemics really increase and deepens all the economic and social stress that were already there in certain, specifically in certain situations, and this has been coupled with isolation, social isolation, so restricted movement, and also on the fact that women in general, for many cultures, are the natural caregivers, so they are much more exposed than other members of the family to the pandemics. So in general, what the surveys and the research that has been done by the UN agencies demonstrated that the COVID, the pandemics had broadened the gender divide and the social divide. This together with climate change, I think this is one of the worst elements that we could assist and we can track on this recent on our history.
Thank you. Lena, did you want to add anything here before we go to the next question in the chat?
Thanks, Shlomi. No, nothing after what has been said, except that, yeah, and as in every other aspect, this pandemic has exacerbated all the all the social inequalities, and yeah, on the economic account, on the gender account, on the education account. That's what I have seen myself, but I have to admit that I haven't dived into studies that are related to the actual effect of pandemics on water and women issues. But yeah.
And that nexus is actually going to be very interesting to explore further. You know, it's a very interesting nexus between COVID-19 and water, and that's certainly going to be, I think, we're going to see more research on that in the water area about how the two kind of relate to one another and what are those impacts. So, good question.
Mm-hmm.
Let me move to the next question in the chat that we have here from one of our audience members. And the question is the following. One observation in Haiti. In communities where women are less educated, their participation is very low in decision-making spaces around water management. In addition, there are very few tools adapted to such a context to stimulate the participation of women, of communities in general, in the management of water services. How does UNESCO, and Michela, this question is certainly directed to you as well, and WAP, and other actors, other participants in this panelists who work with different communities and different organizations, what are the tools, I assume the question is, that can help to reduce this gap, especially in the context of what this audience member is asking? Michela, I don't know if you want to go first in responding to that particular question, but. Or
Yeah.
anyone. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, of course, yes. I mean, this something that I was saying during the presentation was about education, which is actually the fact that we have social norms or situation in which women are less are not able to enjoy the sufficient time for generating income or for taking and completing their education, and this is happening in many countries, but of course in the least developed countries this situation is very difficult and tracked as highly important. This is something that we don't have specific tools to raise this to raise the levels of the educations or reduce this gap. If not those that are related to working with the communities. The communities and the activities that we can have regarding the education of all the members of the community, not only women and girls, is extremely important to raise the level of education for the girls and for young women. What we have seen is a very low level of education in specific topics, and for instance, scientific topics are those that women in general are less interested in, maybe sometimes also for cultural reasons. We actually have a limited number of scientists, women scientists, and compared with other fields. And we see that these are even less in countries which very limited development.
Thank you. I'll turn it to the other panelists from their own perspectives, communities, and research as it relates to tools or strategies as it relates to this specific question.
Well, to have a little bit of positive news to add to the mix, I guess. My recent work has actually been on looking at laws that have now been passed in the 10 most populous countries in South America, and apparently in half of all countries in the world, which establish gender quotas for national elections and subnational elections, where political parties have to, when they nominate their slate of candidates, at least half of them have to be women. And it's been very interesting to see how this kind of filters down to the local level, where now that political parties realize that they have to start preparing women to run campaigns and to speak in public and hold office, I have seen that there is very slowly, as Susanna was talking about, it's a very slow process, but very slowly movements towards, electing women at lower level offices, encouraging, parents primarily. I think it comes when the parents start seeing their daughters as an investment, that they now want to keep their daughters in school. They might even see it as the daughters having more opportunities than the sons because of these development projects for women, because of the election changes, law changes. So it is a slow process, and it's not to say that when they are elected that everybody just listens to them and everything is perfect. There still are those long-standing biases, but I do see that it is moving in a good direction, and I could see that starting to happen in Haiti too, with all of the development projects that must be going on there, that have been going on there over the last decade.
Wonderful. I know Lena and Susanna both want to say something, so please go ahead. Lena or Susanna.
I was going to add that that's a great example, Juliet, of policy really having an impact, and it shows that if there is an institutional will, things can really happen. Just more generally, it's always better to educate women. The more girls are educated, the more likely they are to have fewer children, which is usually a good thing for them as well, because in countries where they're impoverished, it doesn't necessarily help to have more children. But the issue of women in water, I've talked with Maria Daraso about this before, that you need facilities, sanitation facilities for girls to go to school. And maybe they have that in Haiti, but in a lot of countries, they end up dropping out at puberty because they might not have toilets and things. So it's really an issue of between COVID and not enough water resources or maintenance of hygiene, that girls are so vulnerable to not being supported to get an education worldwide. But I'm really heartened by I don't understand why the United States has always been so against quotas. I think they have been a magnificent way to advance women in a lot of other countries. And it really seems like a very good idea.
Thank you. And I know, Lena, you wanted to say something as well.
I lost the track of but yeah, maybe I can just say something about to complete a little bit the idea that we shared about perception and about education, by saying that, yeah, I totally agree, Michela, with the fact that changing perceptions is not enough. Education should be important, and having institutions that are gender sensitive and new rules and norms that are gender sensitive is crucial, because indeed our fundamental principles are in crisis. So what used to be something acquis, something that we should not think about, is becoming is in crisis, and that's why now we do need these gender maybe sensitive institutions and rules to complement. Nothing works to get alone. So changing behavior alone is not enough. Educating is not enough, and having rules without changing the perceptions and the cultural norms and the biases is not enough. So it's a puzzle that has to come together. And something that is very close to my heart is not always like reaching gender equality or having an ideal scenario is not only about empowering women and putting pressure on them so that they have to learn more and they have to upscale their skills and their competences, but it's also about educating the others, so the dominant population on the potential of women, and on the fact that an educated educated woman can be as efficient and can hold a role as a head of RBO, for example, or a head of delegation in a negotiation at an equal foot like a man. So not only women have to be educated to upscale their capacities, and pressure should not only be put on women that they have to reach a certain level to be equal with men, but men have to be educated, and men have to change their perception, and men have to apply the rules and of gender neutral issues, and men have to come and speak in panels like this and defend also this idea and these principles. So thank you, Shlomi, that you are moderating this. But another man, an additional man on the panel would have been also a nice, an added value to our campaign.
So that's a great point, Lena. And actually, we did discuss that, and we just saw the panel growing and growing. But you're absolutely right, and it did come up. And you know what? We're going to do this again on a similar issue, and we're going to bring there will be a man on the panel as well, as a panelist, not just a moderator. So thank you for that. And I think Susanna Rose would definitely agree with you here, because it's not just the responsibility of women or indigenous communities per se, you know, to channel Juliet here, but really the responsibility of everyone, right, to convey this, you know, to convey this very inclusive message. Absolutely. Susanna, did you want to respond to that? Because I think this dovetails with, you know, really your mission and with AWED at FIU, but also beyond.
Well, I just thank you for bringing up that point. You know, we have always made a point to engage men as much as we could in what we're doing, because we all need allies. We need white people to be the allies of the people of color, and so we're not going to get everybody to do that, but it doesn't matter. We just need just enough. I'm a big fan of just enough anything, just enough parenting, just enough allies. You know, it is interesting that in some of the data that were being spoken about, there was 20% women or 27% women, but if those women aren't organized, they're together in some kind of solidarity, it's going to be difficult for them to move the agenda, and you really do need to include the men. And you know, there are men out there. There's a few good men and a few good people out there that will. We really feel that the white people on our team need to take the responsibility for doing some of this work, to take the burden off of, for instance, the Black faculty at FIU. Let me just point out Renee Price is on this webinar. She's one of our faculty fellows. She's been doing a lot of education about best practices for tenure promotion and so forth. But we often have a man and a woman paired together, or we have, you know, try to mix up the race or ethnicity of the people. So I think that also really builds a different community and a different peer culture. So that's a very important thing to do. And it must be very difficult to do on these water boards, though, governance structures. You would actually have to have people come in and the board itself has to make a commitment to learning about this and doing something. And that's the approach we've taken here at FIU, to really see who among the faculty will embrace this and carry these ideas into their departments. And that's why it's slow. Grassroots is slow, but it can work.
Absolutely. I'm mindful of the time. I know that there's another question in the chat, which is certainly a very, very relevant and important question. So let's, you know, perhaps we should just get to that question. And you spoke, and the question is, I'm wondering if the conversations about water and gender can be expanded beyond the usual male-female identification. And so I turn this to anyone on the panel, certainly Michela, yourself, and UNESCO thinking about this as well, but obviously any of the panelists as well in your own work and your own organizations. Great question.
Yeah, yes, of course, this is absolutely some to be considered and to be included in all the gender conversations. It's not only binary gender, but also including the non-binary gender identities. When we talk about, and this is something that UNESCO does and takes into consideration. When we talk about the data, in particular the sex disaggregated data, we have a binary subdivision in male and female. The reason is not for the moment with the intention to enlarge, to extend this view, this approach, and this is not only. This is because very practical reason that we need to start getting data, and those data that are more available are are aggregated data, and whenever they are disaggregated according to sex, what you find in the institutions, in the statistical agencies or works, papers, publications are divided in male and female. So this is a big handicap that we have to start with, but this doesn't mean that we should work with a much more open approach and promote this approach also within the institutions so that they can open the collection of data in this sense.
Thank you. I don't know if there's any of the other panelists want to say anything about this particular issue. Okay. What I thought we would do in the last few minutes that we have about 5 minutes till our 11:30 cutoff time, if you will, is perhaps provide each one of the panelists with an opportunity to say a few last words as it relates to this particular subject that you want to convey to the audience in this particular context. If perhaps we can start with Juliet, if you don't mind starting just a few kind of last parting words as it relates to this topic, and certainly as it relates to your research as well, would be fabulous.
I want to thank you for the opportunity to participate in this panel, and I guess I just am happy to see the different initiatives that are being done to increase the number of voices, the diversity of voices that are contributing to water governance. And as I said earlier on, I think, involving people who might be labeled as less educated or as less capable of talking the talk of international institutions will also contribute valuable voices, and looking at, in particular, the caretaking responsibilities of women and how water relates to those responsibilities, and taking those into consideration when developing plans to improve access to clean water around the world.
Thank you. Lena, could I ask you if you could say a few last words on your part? Thank you. You're on mute.
Thank you. So I just wanted to thank you as well, and then maybe just say one last word about the fact that reaching some kind of gender balance is an endeavor that has to be done through various channels. There is no one channel that has to that would work alone, and in partnership with several types of people and types of institutions as well, because one institution or one type of people won't manage on their own. And we want to do it because it's the right thing to do, not because it's politically correct, not because a woman is more flexible in a negotiation, not because a man is more aggressive in a negotiation, not because we want to be nice and show that we ticked all the boxes, but because it is the right thing to do, and because all people are equal, and it is the right thing to do. So that's it.
Well said. Thank you. Susanna, any final words?
Well, the invisibility of a lot of what women do is really part of the issue, that all of women's work really isn't counted in the economy at all. And that means then it translates into very little interest in having childcare. I see there's a question in the chat, what about maternity leave, childcare, and so forth. Just that women are the glue that holds a lot of the institutions together, and it's just totally left out of the equation for the most part, all their labor. And yes, we do need, I think this COVID crisis has made people realize that, well, we just let every woman has to figure out her own, childcare options everywhere they exist, except Europe has better policies. But so it just, the visibility of women has to be increased. And, I'm an educator. I always come back to that. If women aren't educated, they're not going to be able to have that voice, at least on their own behalf. So I'm heartened by some things that people were said here today, that this whole community is together to work on this issue. Is there a way to have it be less marginalized? I don't even know much about UNESCO, but what is the leadership of UNESCO like? Is Women in Water sort of over there a separate community and marginalized? Is it centralized? We should be part of everything that UNESCO does should include women. So it's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, and that's actually a great segue to Michela for your final words. And Susanna was kind of asking some questions there as well about the organization that you represent, and any final words about what UNESCO is further doing beyond what you covered in your keynote would be certainly appreciated.
Yeah, yes, because UNESCO has a global priority since many years, and it is a global priority on gender equality. And I think that it was one of the first, actually the first agency that was that's established a global priority on this subject, and this is. This can be seen in all the work that UNESCO does, that has the unicity of getting the holistic perspective of different fields, different approaches from education, from science, from culture, and all these aspects are interlinked with the concept of gender equality, and with the call for gender equality, and talking about gender equality and the call, I would like to remind what I said during my presentation, that we actually are working very actively within a multi-stakeholder platform with other UN agencies, with academias, with NGOs, with institutions and member states to prepare the call for action for this year and the next year to accelerate gender equality in the water sector. And of course, we are focused on water sector, but I could say that it would be very important to the different sectors and perspective. this is a totally voluntary participation, and so in this way I extend the invitation also to the participants here, to the panelists, to of course the chair, the UNESCO chair, and the Florida International University already are part of as members of the working group platform, but I would like to extend the invitation to the other participants and attendees to join these efforts and trying to really to work with within their communities or within their institutions or academia to make a change. And this is we need to do it very fast, because 2030 is tomorrow, and we are talking about gender and women invisibility or visibility. And after 25 years that we had the first Beijing Declaration, and we are in 2021. Thank you very much for this for this webinar. I really appreciate it.
Thank you to you, Michela Miletto, for joining us today, your keynote address. I want to thank our panelists, Susanna Rose, Lena Salame, Giulia Daraso, to our partners, the Institute of Environment, the UNESCO Chair, FIU's Office to Advance Women, Equity, and Diversity for partnering on this. Thank you to the audience for your wonderful questions and feedback. And we'll see you again next time we do another event. Thanks again, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you to all.